She waited all evening dressed in her graduation gown, imagining her parents' proud faces in the crowd, but when her name was called and the seats were empty, she realized some of the most important people never show for brightest moments. I need to tell someone this story. Maybe if I write it down, the weight in my chest will finally lift. Maybe someone reading this will think twice before making the choices I made. Maybe I'll stop waking at 3 a.m. replaying every single moment that led me here. It started with graduation day. Not my cheating that came later, but the in my foundation that made everything else possible. I spent 3 hours getting ready that morning, hair curled perfectly, makeup flawless, the cap positioned just right so it wouldn't mess my waves when they called my name. I kept checking my phone for messages from mom and dad. So proud of, sweetheart, or can't wait to see you walk across that stage? Nothing. I called mom around noon, straight to voicemail. Dad's phone did the same thing. I told they were driving phones dead, stuck in traffic. I had invited them months ago. Sent them the ceremony details 3 times, even offered to pay for their hotel. The auditorium filled around me as I sat with my graduating class. Families everywhere, cameras flashing, proud parents wiping away tears. I kept scanning the crowd, looking for familiar faces that never appeared. When they called my name, Sarah Elizabeth Chen, graduating summa laude with a degree in engineering. I walked across that stage smiling for nobody. The camera flashed. I shook hands with the dean. The audience clapped politely for a stranger. I found out later they went to my cousin's engagement party instead. With thought to understand, mom said when I finally reached her that night, family obligations no, we'll celebrate with next time we're in town. Next time, like my college graduation was a casual coffee meetup we could reschedule. That night, sitting alone in my apartment still wearing my cap and gown, something inside me shifted. I stared at the diploma propped against my lamp, and realized I had spent 4 years working toward a moment that meant nothing to the people who were supposed to love me most. I met David 2 weeks later at my new job orientation. He was everything my parents would teen tattoos, motorcycle, the kind of guy who said exactly what he thought without apology. When he asked me out, I said yes because I wanted to feel chosen by someone, anyone. He chose me every single day for 2 years. Brought me coffee every morning, remembered the names of my coworkers, listened to me complain about my boss without trying to fix everything. When I got food, he showed with soup and stayed the whole weekend taking care of me. When I cried about my parents missing my birthday dinner, he held me until I fell asleep. David proposed on the anniversary of our first date. Got down on one knee right there in the restaurant where we met, voice shaking as he told me I was the best thing that ever happened to him. The ring was simple, exactly what I would have picked. Everyone around us started crying happy tears. I should have been the happiest woman alive. Instead, all I could think about was how my parents weren't there to see it. How they'd probably find some excuse to skip the wedding too. How I was always going to be the daughter who didn't matter enough to show for. The resentment ate at me like acid. I started picking fights with David over things. When he'd bring me flowers, I'd complain they were the wrong color. When he'd suggest date nights, I'd say I was too tired. I was punishing him for loving me when the people who were supposed to love me first couldn't be bothered. That's when Marcus showed at our office as the new project manager. Tall, polished, drove a BMW, everything David wasn't. He looked like the kind of man my parents would approve of, would finally be proud to have me with. Marcus noticed me immediately. Complimented my presentations in meetings, asked for my input on decisions, made me feel smart and valuable and seen. When the whole team went out for drinks after landing a big client, he bought my drinks all night and told me I was brilliant. Boyfriend is lucky to have someone like, he said, standing too close at the bar. I should have stepped back. Should have said thank and walked away. Instead I stayed right there, letting his attention fill the empty space my parents had carved out inside me. Sometimes I wonder if he really sees me, I heard say. The words were out before I could stop them. Marcus smiled. I see, Pop. 3 words that rewrapped everything. He saw me, not the daughter who wasn't worth showing for, not the girlfriend who was taken for granted. He saw me as someone worth pursuing, worth impressing, worth choosing over everyone else. That was the beginning of the end of everything good in my. Over the next month, Marcus and I started staying late at the office together. Just work, I told. Just professional collaboration. But our conversations got longer, more personal. He asked about my family, my dreams, my frustrations with David. Deserve someone who celebrates, he'd say. Someone who makes feel like the most important person in the room. I knew what he was doing, I wasn't naive. But God help me, it felt so good to feel wanted like that. To have someone pursue me the way David used to, before routine and comfort made him stop trying so hard. The night it happened, David was at his brother's bachelor party. I was supposed to go straight home, maybe catch on wedding planning. Instead, I texted Marcus about grabbing dinner to discuss the Henderson project. We went to this little Italian place downtown. He ordered. We talked about work for maybe 10 minutes before the conversation shifted to us, to the tension that had been building for weeks. I can't stop thinking about, he said, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I know, feel it too. I did feel it. The electricity, the possibility, the promise of being chosen by someone new. Someone who looked at me like I was a prize instead of a sure thing. I pulled my hand away. Marcus, I'm engaged. To someone who doesn't appreciate what he has. That's not fair. David loves me. Does he? When's the last time he surprised? When's the last time he made feel like this? Like what? Like I was on fire. Like every nerve ending in my body was awake for the first time in months. Like I mattered enough to risk everything for. I should have paid the check and left. Should have called David and told him I loved him and was sorry for being distant lately. Should have remembered that the empty seats at my graduation had nothing to do with him. Instead, I let Marcus drive me home. Let him walk me to my door. Let him me on the front steps of the home I shared with my fiancé. Let him come inside when I should have said goodbye. What happened next lasted 2 hours and destroyed 3 years of love, trust, and promises. When it was over, Marcus got dressed and left like nothing had happened. I sat on my bathroom floor until David's key turned in the lock at midnight, trying to scrub the betrayal off my skin. David bounced through the door, still buzzed from the bachelor party, full of stories about his brother and excitement about our own wedding in 6 months. "How was night?" he asked, kissing my forehead like he always did. I looked into his trusting eyes and lied. "Quiet, just worked on some wedding stuff." That lie was the first domino. Everything that came after. The guilt, the shame, the unraveling of my entire, started with those 7 words. I thought I could bury it. Thought I could carry the secret and move on, be a better fiancé, make it to David without him ever knowing. I thought the guilt would fade and we'd live happily ever after. I had no idea that secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, usually when have the most to lose. The guilt hit me in waves. Monday morning at the coffee shop, watching David order my usual latte with extra foam, the way he had every morning for 2 years. Tuesday night, when he surprised me with takeout from my favorite Thai place because I'd had a rough day. Wednesday, when he spent his lunch break helping me pick out centerpieces for our wedding. Every kindness was a twist. Every "I love" was a reminder of what I'd thrown away for 2 hours with someone who hadn't texted me since. I told I'd never see Marcus again outside of work, that I'd be professional, distant, cold, that I'd focus on David and our future and pretend that night never happened. Marcus had other plans. He started small, lingering looks across the conference room, emails marked urgent, that were anything but, coffee appearing on my desk with little notes, thinking of, or, can't concentrate today. We need to talk. I finally cornered him after a team meeting. What happened was a mistake. It can't happen again. He smiled that same smile that had gotten me into trouble. "Relax, Sarah, I'm not gonna tell anyone, but can't pretend didn't feel something. I'm engaged. To the wrong person." "Stop. Wouldn't have let me in if didn't know that already." He was wrong, I'd let him in because I was broken, not because David was wrong for me. But saying that felt like admitting too much, so I walked away instead. David noticed the change in me immediately. I jumped when his phone buzzed, got defensive when he asked about work, started working late more often, even when I didn't need to. "Okay," he asked one evening, finding me staring blankly at wedding dress websites. "Been off lately. Just stressed about the wedding." I lied. "There's so much to plan." He sat beside me on the couch, pulled me against his chest the way he always did when I was overwhelmed. "We can push it back if want, or elope. I don't care about the party, Sarah. I just want to marry." The sincerity in his voice broke something inside me. This man would have married me in a courthouse wearing jeans if that's what I wanted. He loved me that completely, that unconditionally, and I'd repaid that love by letting another man into our bed. I started crying then, sobs that shook my whole body. Heard David held me tighter, whispering that everything would be okay, that we'd figure it out together. If only he'd known there was no wet anymore. There was just me and my secret and the growing chasm between who he thought I was and who I'd become. 3 weeks passed. I thought maybe I could make it work. Maybe the guilt would fade and I'd learn to live with what I'd done. Maybe Marcus would get bored and leave me alone. Then David's sister Emma called on a Thursday night. "Hey, can meet me for lunch tomorrow. There's something I need to talk to about." Emma and I had always gotten along well. She was protective of David but fair. Never made me feel like I wasn't good enough for her brother. Her voice on the phone was strange though, careful. Like she was picking her words. We met at a little bistro downtown. Emma ordered a salad she didn't eat, pushed lettuce around her plate while making small talk about work, the weather, anything except why we were there. "Ma, what's go on?" I finally asked. She looked then, and I saw something in her eyes that made my freeze. Knowledge, disappointment, pity. "I saw," she said quietly. My heart stopped. "Saw me what?" 3 weeks ago, Thursday night. We're at Romano's with a man. Not David Romano's, the Italian restaurant. Marcus holding my hand across the table, walking me to his car, following me home. "It's not what think." I started, but she held her hand. I sat there for 20 minutes watching too. The way he looked at. The way looked back. I kept hoping David would walk in. That maybe it was some work thing I didn't understand. My mouth went dry. "Emma." But then left together. And I followed. The words hit me like a physical. She'd followed us. Seen Marcus me on my doorstep. Seen him go inside the house David and I shared. "I've been sick about this for 3 weeks, she continued. Going back and forth about whether to tell David, whether to confront first. I love my brother Sarah. He's planning to spend the rest of his with thou. I love him too. Do." Her voice was sharp now. "Because love doesn't look like what I saw that night." I wanted to explain about graduation, about my parents, about feeling invisible and unworthy and desperate to matter to someone. I wanted to tell her about the loneliness that had been eating me alive, about how Marcus had made me feel seen in a way I'd forgotten was possible. Instead, I just sat there while she delivered my ultimatum. Have until Sunday to tell him. If don't, I will. Sunday. 3 days to find the words to destroy the best man I'd ever known. That night, David was in such a good mood. His best friend had agreed to be his best man. His mom had found the perfect venue for the rehearsal dinner. He was showing me photos on his phone, talking about how perfect everything was going to be. 6 months, he said, kissing my temple. 6 more months and he'll be stuck with me forever. Can't wait, I whispered, hating for the lie. I practiced the conversation 100 different ways. Sat in my car Friday morning running through scripts, trying to find words that would him less. There were no such words. Saturday night I almost did it. We were making dinner together, laughing at some joke he'd made, and for a moment it felt like before. Like maybe I could tell him and we could work through it somehow. Heard. Then he started talking about the honeymoon he'd been planning in secret. How he'd booked us a cabin in the mountains because he remembered me mentioning once that I'd never seen snow. How he'd been saving for months to make it perfect. I couldn't do it. Couldn't watch his face break apart while he was talking about our future with such joy. Sunday came anyway. I woke knowing it was the last morning I'd wake next to David as his fiancé. He was already making coffee, humming some song under his breath. He brought me a cup in bed like he did every weekend, sat beside me while I drank it. "What do you want to do today?" he asked. "It's supposed to be beautiful out. Maybe we could go hiking." I almost said yes. Almost pretended for one more day that we were still whole, still possible. My phone buzzed. A text from Emma. "Times pumped David," I said, and something in my voice made him go very still. "We need to talk." He set his coffee down carefully. Okay, I'd imagined this moment for days. Hurt, but sitting there looking at his trusting face, I realized no amount of preparation could make this easier. I did something terrible. I began the next hour was the worst of my. Watching David's face change as I told him about Marcus, about that night, about the betrayal I'd carried for 3 weeks. He didn't yell, didn't throw things or storm out like I'd expected. He just got very quiet, very small, like I'd physically struck him. "Why?" he asked finally. It was barely a whisper. I tried to explain about graduation, her about feeling abandoned and unworthy, about how Marcus had made me feel chosen, about how it had nothing to do with David and everything to do with my own brokenness. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Was it worth it?" he asked. "No," I said immediately. God, no, it was the biggest mistake of my pile, but made it anyway. I had no answer for that because yes, I'd made it anyway. Made it knowing exactly what I was risking, what I was throwing away. David stood then. Bedroom came back with a suitcase. "I need to leave," he said. I can't look it right now." "David, please. Can't we try to work through this?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Work through it." Sarah slept with someone else in our bed. In the bed where I've been telling I love every single night for 2 years. The words hit like bullets. He was right. I'd brought Marcus into the space that was supposed to be ours alone. Contaminated every memory we'd made there. I packed quickly, grabbed essentials while David sat on the couch staring at nothing. When I was done, I stood by the door hoping he'd say something, anything. He looked once. "I bought engagement ring the day after our first date," he said. Sal laughed at something I said and knew I wanted to marry. Carried it around for 18 months waiting for the perfect moment. Each word was a fresh wound. David, I was gonna love forever, no matter what, through everything. The past tense broke me. Still could. He shook his head. "No, I can't, because every time I look at now I'll see him. And I'll wonder what I did wrong. What I wasn't giving that made need someone else. Didn't do anything wrong. Then why does it feel like I failed?" I left him sitting there, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, and I knew I'd just broken the heart of the only person who'd ever loved me completely. The worst part was that he'd blame himself, spend months wondering what he could have done differently, when the truth was simpler and more brutal. I'd destroyed us because I was too damaged to recognize love when it was staring me in the face. I moved into a studio apartment across town. One room barely big enough for a bed and a couch, walls so thin I could hear my neighbors' every conversation. It was all I could afford on my own, all I deserved after what I'd done. The first week I kept expecting David to call. To say he'd forgiven me, that we could try counseling, that love could overcome this. My phone stayed silent. Emma texted once. "His not eating. Hasn't left the apartment in 5 days. I hope it was worth it." It wasn't. Nothing about any of this was worth it. I into work, staying late every night, volunteering for every project, anything to avoid going home to that empty room. Marcus tried to talk to me in the break room one afternoon. "I heard about and David," he said, leaning against the counter like nothing had changed. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "Look, Sarah, what happened between us was special. But I never meant for." Stop. I couldn't listen to him minimize what we'd done. "Don't dare call it special. It was selfish and cruel, and it destroyed the best thing in my, being dramatic. Dramatic. Like David's broken heart was just theater. Like the way he'd looked at me that last morning was just performance art." That's when I realized Marcus didn't feel guilty at all. He'd pursued a taken woman, helped me betray someone who trusted me completely, and felt nothing about it. I'd thrown away forever for someone who saw me as a conquest, not a person. The office gossip started within the week. People whispering in corners, conversations stopping when I walked into a room. Someone had seen David clearing out his desk drawer where he kept photos of us. Someone else noticed I wasn't wearing my engagement ring anymore. Is it true? My coworker Lisa asked me directly one morning. Did really cheat on David with Marcus? I wanted to lie, to preserve what little dignity I had left, but the truth was going to come out anyway. It always does. "Yes," I said quietly. The judgment in her eyes was immediate and absolute. "David's a good guy. Why would do that to him?" I didn't have an answer she'd understand. How to explain that sabotaged own happiness cause felt unworthy of it? How to tell someone traded forever for a night because we're too broken to recognize love? The wedding vendors started calling. The caterer, the florist, the photographer who'd seemed so excited to capture our love story. Each conversation was a fresh reminder of what I'd lost. "I'm so sorry to hear about the cancellation," the venue coordinator said. "David seemed like such a sweet young man when toured our facility. Is there anything we can do?" What could anyone do? I'd poisoned the well, contaminated every plan we'd made, every dream we'd shared. My parents called that weekend. They'd heard from my aunt, who'd heard from Emma, who'd heard from David's mother. "We're very disappointed in," Mom said, her voice cold and distant. "That boy loved. Why would throw that away? Funny how they suddenly cared about my relationship after missing my graduation, after years of treating David like he wasn't good enough for their daughter. Now that I'd ruined it, now he was that sweet boy and I was the villain. Always were selfish, Dad added. Never could appreciate what had. They weren't wrong, but hearing it from them in a different way. The parents who'd never shown for me, who'd made me feel invisible and unworthy, were now lecturing me about appreciation and love. 2 months passed. I heard through mutual friends that David was seeing someone new. A teacher named Claire who volunteered at animal shelters and baked cookies for her elderly neighbors. Everything I should have been but wasn't. Part of me wanted to be bitter about it. How had he moved on so quickly? How was he already giving someone else the love I'd thrown away? But mostly I was glad. David deserved someone who wouldn't take his devotion for granted. Someone who wouldn't let their damage something beautiful. Someone who would show for him the way he'd always shown for them. I started therapy around month 3. Dr. Martinez was patient and kind, never judging, just asking questions that forced me to look at honestly. Tell me about graduation day, she said during one session. I told her about the empty seats, about waiting for parents who never came, about feeling abandoned and unworthy. And how did that make feel about? Like I didn't matter. Like I wasn't worth showing for. So when Marcus showed for pursued made feel worthy of his attention. It felt like proof that I mattered to someone. Even though already mattered to David. That was the question that broke me open. Because yes, I'd mattered to David, I'd been the most important person in his world, and somehow that hadn't been enough. His steady, faithful love couldn't compete with Marcus's flashy pursuit, because I'd been too damaged to value what I had. David's love felt too easy, I admitted. Like maybe it wasn't real because I didn't have to earn it. And Marcus's attention felt more valuable because it was forbidden. Because it was risky. Because I had to compete for it. Because it meant someone thought I was worth risking everything for. Even though we're the one doing the risking. I saw it then, the twisted logic that had guided my choices. I'd mistaken Marcus's willingness to help me betray David for some grand romantic gesture, when really it just meant he had no respect for relationships or boundaries. I'd thought his pursuit proved my worth, when really it just proved his selfishness. David's love had been the real thing. Steady, faithful, unconditional. He'd chosen me every single day without reservation, and I'd thrown it away for the cheap thrill of being chased by someone who saw me as entertainment. The holidays were the worst. Thanksgiving alone in my studio, scrolling through social media photos of David and Claire at his family's dinner. Christmas morning with no one to exchange gifts with, no traditions to maintain, no future to plan for. I'd been invited to exactly 0 holiday gatherings. Friends had chosen sides, and David had won decisively. I was the woman who'd cheated, the one couldn't trust around husband, the cautionary tale people whispered about at parties. Did hear about Sarah, a perfectly good man for her boss. So sad. They weren't wrong to whisper. I was a cautionary tale, a walking example of how self-sabotage can destroy everything good. And Marcus got promoted in January. The company him a celebration dinner, invited the whole team. I watched him give a speech about dedication and integrity while his wife beamed beside him. His wife. I'd known he was married, but I'd pushed that knowledge down, refused to think about the other woman I was helping him betray. Seeing her there, so proud of her husband, so trusting and happy, made me sick. She looked like David had looked at our engagement party. Like someone whose world was exactly as it should be, who had no idea that the person they loved most was capable of such deception. I wondered if Marcus would do it again. If he was already selecting his next victim, already whispering to some other broken woman about how she deserved better than what she had. I wanted to warn his wife, to tell her what kind of man she'd married, but what right did I have? I was the other woman, the homewrecker, the one who'd helped him cheat. Anything I said would sound like jealousy or revenge. Instead, I submitted my resignation the next Monday, found a new job across the state, packed my few belongings, and left town like the coward I'd always been. But can't run from, can't escape the person are the choices made, the damage you've caused. It follows everywhere, a shadow that never gets shorter. I'm writing this 5 years later from my apartment in Portland. I never married. Never found love again. A few men have tried, but I can see the doubt in their eyes when they learn I'm divorced. I lie about what ended my engagement. It's easier than explaining. They wonder what I did wrong, what kind of person I really am underneath the pleasant exterior. They're right to wonder. I'm the kind of person who destroys beautiful things because they feel too good to be real. The kind who mistakes attention for affection, pursuit for love, chaos for passion. David married Claire 3 years ago. I know because Emma posted the wedding photos on Facebook before blocking me. They looked genuinely happy, the way David and I never quite did because I was always holding something back, always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They have a daughter now. A little girl with David's dark eyes and Claire's bright smile. In the photos, David looks at his family the same way he used to look at me, like they're his whole world, like he'd do anything to protect them. Claire will never know how lucky she is. She'll never know that she married a man who would have loved her through anything, who would have fought for their relationship even when she was too broken to for it herself. She'll never know because she'll never give him reason to doubt her. She'll never take his love for granted or go looking for validation in someone else's arms. She'll never throw away forever for a moment. Sometimes I imagine what mine would look like if I'd made different choices. If I'd gone home that night instead of to dinner with Marcus. If I'd talked to David about feeling unworthy instead of seeking worth in betrayal. If I'd gotten therapy before I destroyed everything instead of after. We'd probably have 2 kids by now. A house with a garden, traditions and inside jokes and all the small intimacies that build it together. I'd wake every morning next to someone who chose me, who saw all my damage and loved me anyway. Instead, I wake alone, always alone, carrying the weight of what I weigh. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't just break the person betrayed. It breaks too in ways that never quite heal. It changes how others see, how love feels in mouth. Every relationship since has been tainted by what I did to David. Not because I'm afraid of cheating again. I know now that I'd never survive another destruction like that one, but because I know what I'm capable of. I know that when love feels too good, too pure, too unearned, some dark part of me wants to it before it can be taken away. I'm in therapy still, working on becoming someone worthy of the love I away. But some lessons come too late, and some mistakes can't be unmade. If we're reading this and thinking about stepping outside relationship, about risking everything for a moment of feeling chosen by someone new, let me save the trouble. It's not worth it. That person pursuing, they don't see worth, they see weakness. They don't want to love, they want to prove they can take. And when the thrill is over, when the damage is done, they'll move on to the next broken person who mistakes attention for affection. Hurt'll be left with nothing but the memory of who used to be before destroyed the best thing in for someone who never deserved a single moment of time. Trust me on this. I'm the expert on throwing away forever for nothing. And the saddest part, the person the most isn't the one betrayed. It's the person staring back at in the mirror, wondering how they became someone capable of such destruction.